Hi, Alison. Thank you for joining me today for another one of our Fireside chats.
Hi, Lauren. Great to see you.
Great to be here. So today we are going to talk about HR tech and, how HR tech has fundamentally changed HR and the way that HR deal with, everything now. Obviously, you've been in the role for quite a while. You've been working in HR for a long time. So I'd love to know, tell me more about it. Tell me more about HR tech, your experience, and sort of where you've seen it change.
Great, sure. So just to introduce myself initially. So I'm the head of customer delivery and success here at Our Tandem. As you said, I've spent my career really in the HR space, about 11 years now. The first over 7 years of that in HR roles specifically. So across that time, really a mix of kind of HR business partnering roles and some time in recruiting as well. So had seen some very traditional HR practices, particularly in relation to things like performance management, annual performance reviews. And I've also seen traditional HR teams then implementing new HR technology and the value that that technology brings to the business, but also to the HR function and roles within the HR function. And I guess it was for that reason that I jumped over onto the client side, more of consulting type roles. And now I work with customers to ensure that they're successful when they implement new HR technologies. So that's a little bit about, I guess, my career to date. And touching more on the HR technology piece, I think it's been really interesting to see how that's evolved over the last number of decades. And Josh Bersin, who we all know, recently wrote an article actually on it that just kind of pulled out a couple of interesting points looking back. So if we think back to the 70s and the 80s, we first saw what was called the ERP, or the Enterprise Resource Planning technology, appearing for the first time. And really that is kind of the backbone of many of our global businesses today. And then after that, we saw the human capital management system coming through. So things like payroll, people management, the really functional side of HR was represented on those HCMs. And that was successful, but I think over time we realized that people change, they evolve, they're constantly moving. So we needed more. And in recent years, we've seen HR teams really layer some of these value add human capital tools on top of their HCMs. So things like learning management systems, applicant tracking systems, and then more recently, things like continuous performance management and employee engagement tools. So in that article, Josh Bersin said that really those value add human capital technologies are now the core of HR technology, just given how key they are to enabling people in today's business environment.
Yeah, it makes sense. I suppose as well, because of how much is out there now, it really does help HR give their people the things that they need to be the best in the company, which is great. I would love to know your thoughts on how you feel like HR technology has really evolved over the last number of decades. I know you've dived into different techs that have come up, but what's really been the difference in the evolution of it?
Yeah, and I think even as we think about that, in that same article that I referenced, there are different layers of how companies are adopting HR technology, right? So there are some companies that are right at the beginning of the journey where they're implementing some of those HCM systems. They're still tied up in process. And then we have really, really future-focused HR teams who are really focused on strategy, how they use technology to enable strategy, to enable the business, right? So we're really looking at companies at different stages of that evolution. And I think the technology has evolved with what the business has demanded. So I talked about basic human capital management systems, focused on payroll. Then we saw the emergence of L&D technology as a lot of L&D went online. We wanted on-demand L&D. And in more recent years, I think we're looking at more of that employee engagement, continuous performance management technology coming to the fore. And I think a lot of that is to do with what we've seen happening in the real world. So over the last number of years, really the HR role has been transformed even further. So I suppose if we take a step back, traditionally HR was seen as an administrator. We had spreadsheets, we looked after who was hired, who was fired. Then we saw the introduction of the HR business partnering role, and that was for HR to sit between the business and the HR team, and to really have that influencing input on how the business was managing their people. And then more recently, we saw the chief HR officer role coming to the fore. And that was really when HR had a seat at the table, that strategic person, that trusted advisor who brought best practice. I think over the last couple of years, we've really seen HR having to step up even further. So when COVID hit, it was HR who had to figure out how we could keep businesses going by enabling people to work remotely, enabling them to be productive remotely, managing them remotely, all of the good things that come along with that. And then since COVID and since we've begun to recover from COVID, we're looking at this great resignation. So everybody wants a change. Everybody wants their sense of purpose. It's back to HR around how do we keep people engaged? How do we create a culture in the organization that will allow us to keep people, show them that they have a longer term career? And actually, I think that HR technology sits behind all of that. So having systems that will allow us to offload the administrative work, that will allow us to pull insights so we can go to the business with data that will drive people decisions, has really just enabled the HR profession to completely reinvent itself, to take a step up, to become that trusted advisor that, as I say, is bringing real data behind how we're treating our people and how we're planning for the future in terms of people and business.
Yeah, makes so much sense. And with that, where do you think the HR role could go? I mean, you're saying there's the new emergence of it. They've got the CHRO now, not just that people person that sort of brought them in. Do you see the role growing? Do you see it becoming something else?
Yeah, well, I think in the last couple of years, we've actually seen a couple of major instances of people who've come up through HR in the organization and then go on to actually CEO positions. So I think that's where HR is going. I think HR people are people who understand the heart of the business, how people operate, how they're productive, how they grow, how they develop, how they innovate. And we can talk about technology, and we're here talking about technology today, but really technology is an enabler of great people. That's the purpose of technology. Businesses will not run based on robots. It's all about human thinking and freeing up that human mind to think, to innovate, to grow. And I think businesses, more traditional businesses, are coming around to realizing that actually HR professionals are people who understand the heart of the business. And with that, there's a huge contributor to enabling the business to grow.
Yeah, it's quite interesting as well you mentioned that, because as somebody who's come from companies that haven't had HR people as the leaders of the company, to now working at Tandem, where the leadership are all people that have been in HR and have done that position and really had to learn about the people that are in the company. I noticed the difference as an employee working for a company where management have been there and they've done that and they've been the employee and they've had to make sure that everyone's happy and getting what they need. And I think it's so true. I mean, I think of Aisling, and I think the reason she's such a great leader is because she's been there as a HR person, making sure that people are doing really well and they know what's best for them. So now she can do that for her people in the company, which I think is amazing.
And I think she's also bringing that experience to designing the technology that will work best for people, right? And it's really invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, with that as well, obviously, post-COVID, a lot of things have changed. I mean, take hybrid working. Before COVID, I worked 5 days a week in the office. I now work no days a week in an office unless, I pop over to Dublin to see everyone. I think the great thing about Tandem is that we've created a platform that really enables this new world that we live in. What role do you think that Our Tandem is going to play in this sort of post-COVID world that we're living in?
Yeah. Well, earlier, I talked about COVID, working from home, and then post-COVID and keeping people and engaging people. And I've also mentioned how I think technology is an enabler. I think really this is the time for Our Tandem. So our technology allows us to push those people activities back into the business, integrate them into daily activity. So things that sound so simple, like looking for feedback, giving feedback, creating goals that are agile, that are relevant, but that are agile, as we all now know how quickly the world can change. I think putting the values of the organization at the heart of how people are working every day, so that people really understand their purpose in the organization, what they're working towards in terms of the greater strategy. And then I think more practical things as well that Our Tandem really, really does beautifully. So the performance review, for example, has been such an administrative burden for HR professionals traditionally over so many decades. And I think what we do is really automate that whole process, bring it to the center of people's working lives, allow them to really easily access feedback, goals, progress, to have that cohesive performance review experience. And then on the data side, I mentioned it earlier, but the data that you can pull from Tandem on what people are doing, how they're working, what they're working on, what type of feedback they're getting, and then pulling that all together to tell the story to leadership around what's happening in the organization, regardless of whether people are in the office or they're in their homes in this country or another country or anywhere in the world. I just think that data is so rich and it tells such an unbelievable story that I think business leaders can really get insight into what's happening with their people. And then that forms the whole basis of how do we invest our resources most wisely to get the most out of our people, to give them the best experience and to develop the culture the way it needs to go. So I think in a lot of ways, the Tandem technology delivers all of that, but in such a user-centric and simple way. That's so easy for people to adopt. I think that's what HR teams and businesses want. They want technology that fits easily into their day-to-day lives, and just adds huge value. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of it is the behavior tag. I can, when I get feedback, I'm told whether something I've done has impacted the way the company is and the behaviors of the company. And it's like Lauren has shown this character, which is a characteristic of the company. And it's like every time I see it, I'm like, oh, look at me doing well. It's just such a nice feeling. And I think it gives that connection. As somebody that's not in the office and not with the team, I feel connected to people, even though we're not all together. And I think that's what's so great about it, is that it helps create connection, even though we're in that world now where we're not always seeing each other and living in that Monday to Friday office environment. I've got loads of people love about it, but that's one of my favorites.
But we hear so much about purpose as well, Lauren, around regardless of where people sit in the organization or what level, everybody wants to feel like they're working towards something that matters. And I think being able to tag those strategic priorities just allows people to understand the value of the work that they're doing. And you really have to put a price on that.
And then also when you get a little notification on your phone that someone sent you feedback, and then you're out and you're like, oh, what's this? And then you check and you're like, oh, so lovely. I love that on a Friday. Like when we do feedback Friday, and they come through all different times of the day. Like you'll be on lunch, so you'll see your phone and you'll be like, oh, I've got feedback. It's just such a nice feeling, isn't it? Like it just lifts you up. It's great. I love it.
Absolutely.
And on that lovely positive note, I would love to know what your favorite thing is about working in HR, and what's brought you to this industry and why you're still working in it today.
Well, what brought me to HR initially was really a fascination with people. So I think how people work, how people don't work sometimes, how people engage together, and really just I'm fascinated by business and how people contribute to that. And I think throughout my career then in working in both HR roles and now supporting customers with HR technology, it's really how do we support people to support businesses? How do we grow people to grow businesses, engage people to ensure that business keeps evolving, and people can innovate and be really successful? And I think it's that people are not, they're a science, and people don't only have work, they have lives, and so many things can impact people's behavior. And I think what's really attracted me to Our Tandem is the fact that the technology is so simple that, we consider all of these agilities in people's lives, these changes that people work from different places, that people operate in different ways, and just bringing that all together is such a positive working experience for employees, managers, business leaders. So I think it's that fascination with people, and continues to be, that keeps me in this space. Yeah. And how really HR technology is evolving, because there's been fascinating change over the last number of years, and it's great to be on that journey.
Yeah, I see so many coming out all the time. Like, I'll be on LinkedIn and I'll see another company that's doing something really fascinating in HR, and I'm like, so interesting. There's so many things going on now that, yeah, it's great. It's a brilliant industry to be in. I'm really enjoying it as well, so I'm glad I joined it as well.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Really enjoyed chatting to you, picking your brain about your experience in HR. So thank you for making the time. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Great to chat.